So yeah, I'm here with Zoe Margolis and Sunny Hundal. And I'll just do a really quick introduction. I mean, I've known Sunny for long enough. We haven't really properly met until today, actually, though. Sunny's quite a prolific blogger. He's winner of The Guardian Best Blogger of the Year 2006, which is about the same time when Zoe won the award for the Best British Irish Blogger. Is that correct? Twice in a row, 2 years in a row. Sunny's founder of Barfi Culture, which deals with sort of Asian-related kind of news, and he's also one of the people who's involved with Open Democracy. And yeah, he's just been around quite a while, sort of being an activist and kind of making things better for people who are secularists, I guess, as well as actually religious people as well. And one of the ways you can know that is if you search for his name on Google, the first person that comes up, this shows you the trenches he's in, will be Tommy Robinson. Related searches are for Tommy Robinson. So he's really in the trenches, basically. Zoe is one of the patrons of Humanists UK. She has a blog that was written anonymously, and then there was a big, very, from what I understand, difficult reveal. And then she ended up writing a book. Well, she was writing a book about the blog called Diary of a Sex Fiend.
No, Girl with a One-Track
Mind. Girl with a
One-Track
Mind.
That was the American title,
That's
which
the American.
I hated.
Right, okay. Girl with a One-Track Mind. And she's written for The Guardian, Buzzfeed, Cosmopolitan. She's written quite a few places. Her books have been translated into 16 languages. And I think most recently, from what I understand, some of the work has been around faith schools and the kind of shaming in sex education that comes about with faith schools. So yeah, so we've got both of these speakers. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of religion today and what that might mean for people in the 21st century. My name is Imtiaz Shams. I'm a trustee of Humanists UK. I'm also founder of Faith to Faithless, which deals with people who leave conservative religion. It's a program of Humanists UK. So yes, I think the way we'll do this is Sunny will start with a little bit of a talk about his activities and what he thinks about this question. We'll go on to Zoe, and then we'll open it up to a discussion. And then I really am keen about getting your input as part of the kind of discussion we're having. So can you put your hands together for Sunny?
Thanks, Imtiaz, and thanks everyone for coming down and giving up your Saturday to listen to me and Zoe, obviously, and Imtiaz. So I want to talk about religion in the 21st century by talking briefly about my brother. My brother died last year of cancer. He was 2 years younger than me, and he was very different to me. He was one of the most popular Sikh preachers in the UK, if not the world. And he did that almost entirely using YouTube as a way to talk to people, second generation, third generation, British Sikhs, American Sikhs, Canadian Sikhs. He would get invited as far as Malaysia and Indonesia to talk to Sikhs about their religion, talk to younger generation people about their community and what they should aspire to, and did this entirely through YouTube in the same way that I've used blogs and Twitter and Facebook to communicate with people all over the world. And what was interesting about my brother, Jagraj Singh, was that he came up at a time when a lot of people were looking for this, they were searching for this identity. Young British Sikhs who wanted to know about what kind of world do they want to live in, but also what was their background, what was their identity. They were searching for a meaning. And he came up to them almost, in some ways quite physically in his videos, and saying, this is what our community is about, this is what our history is about, this is what our people are supposed to do, and this is how we are supposed to try and change the world for better as Sikhs. In a way, social justice, trying to talk about social justice, but also talking about their identity, gave them a sense of identity and community in a way that's very difficult for us to do as humanists, as liberals. And we have to understand that language. And what's interesting for me was that, at university when I went in '95, a lot of young Muslims went through the same journey. And Imtiaz knows some of this, He was around at that time too. We saw these people grow up, and we have seen some of their faces on TV. These young Muslims growing up and sort of standing up for the right to practice Islam, and sort of some of them becoming sort of joining more extreme fringe groups. And so Sikhs have sort of started this similar journey more recently. Muslims started it 20 years ago. And we have seen these people grow up, and and a lot of people feel like, are these people going to, take back the rights that we fought so hard for? And that's a debate that I feel is quite prominent amongst left, liberal, humanist, secularist, atheist circles. This feeling that these people are going to encroach on territory and rights that we fought so hard for, on secularism, on free speech, on our way of life. And that's pretty much the sort of focus on of my talk, which is just not talk, more of a conversation, but just say, look, these are not people, these are not necessarily our enemies, but we do have to speak to them in a language that they understand. And that's not what we're doing right now. And so what I wanted to say was that to come here is that I don't have to tell you that we have to stand up for free speech, or we have to stand up for liberalism, or we have to stand up for, secularism. You know that already. The question is, how can we convince these young people who are searching for identity, who have become more religious, how can we convince them that we are allies, that we are fighting for the same things? And so briefly, let's talk about, for example, secularism. And I have gone to a group of young Muslims and said to them, this is why we should have the right to insult your prophet. And I came out of that debate not only alive, but also able to convince a majority of them that actually he's got a point. So you're not going to convince everyone. But the mistake that we make, the first mistake that we make, is we say to them, like it or lump it. This is our culture. This is our way of the world that we live in now. And we have to try and, give everyone sort of that space to criticize your religion. And it kind of works, but it doesn't work to a certain extent, because what we're basically saying is take it or leave it. But what we have to do is engage them in a conversation which says, look, this is in your interests. And we can make that argument quite easily. We know that if you want a society where other people, minorities especially, want to practice their religion, in effect, they are criticizing the dominant religion, Christianity, by propagating their own faith. Muslims are able to stand on street corners and say that Islam is the right way of living. And they can do that without going to jail, because this country allows people to blaspheme against Christianity. So you want, in effect, a society in which the state does not have preference for one religion over another. It helps minorities able to live their lives more freely. So when I tell Sikhs that they should embrace secularism, I'm saying, look, it's not a difficult one. Secularism allows you to practice your faith in this country. That's why you should fight for it. Free speech allows you to criticize other religions. It gives you the freedom to challenge governments. It allows you to stand up for minority rights. That's why you should embrace free speech. Not for the benefit of the government, but you should embrace free speech because it's in your interests. And the mistake that I feel a lot of liberals or secularists or humanists make is that we're not telling them what is in their interests. We're basically just saying, take it or leave it. But in fact, when I talk to religious people, I find it quite easy to convince them and say, no, this is in your interest. Secularism, free speech, the right to insult your religion is in your interests, because if we didn't have that, then you would not be able to practice. You might not like it. You're more than happy to, you should have the right to protest against it if you want to. But within that democratic society, you should allow people to threaten your religion. Sorry, not threaten your religion, but you should allow people to insult your religion. So I feel like the arguments can be made, but we're not making them. So a lot of the time I spend defending religious groups and defending the right of religious people to live their lives freely. I defend the rights of women to wear the niqab because I don't like it. But I feel like they should have the freedom to practice their own religion if they want to. Now, we can get into a whole debate about how much are they forced into doing so, and I'm happy to have that debate. But at the end of the day, my brother brought up his children, young children, wearing a turban, both the boy and the girl when they were young. Should they not be allowed to do that? I feel like if he wants to bring them up with his own way of the world, with his own outlook on the world, then he should be allowed to, because as parents, we all make that judgment. Now, we have to have a debate about where that line lies. But if we want to say that we want to stand up for the right and the liberty of people to live their lives how they want to, that should apply to religious people as well. So I say to religious people, I will fight for your right to wear what you want. At the same time, you have to fight for my right to not wear what I want, to leave religion if you want to practice atheism if you want to have alternatives to religion. Now, I don't follow religion, but I do feel like we have to defend their rights. And so I sort of sometimes see these people, the new atheists, the Sam Harris, that sort of crowd, the Douglas Murray crowd, as problematic, because I feel like they are trying to create a false war with people where it's not necessary. My aim is to bring people together, is to say, look, we can work together to create a better country. If that's what you want to do. If you don't want to create a better country and you just want people to fight with each other, that's fine. But that is not the agenda that we're interested in. So if we want a world in which people like my brother can bring up his children in a more religious way, I might not agree with it, and I don't, and my children are not going to grow up following any religion, but they will certainly know about their history, then that I should have that freedom as much as he wants his freedom. What's wrong with that? Thank you.
So really, can you guys all hear me, by the way, at the back? You're fine, yeah? It's a very interesting point about communication you made there. I mean, recently there's been the Chinese camps. Have you heard of this? Where Muslims are being put for re-education in these camps because China doesn't want the Uyghur Muslims to be kind of promoting Islam. And I've been having very interesting discussions with Muslim activists online about this, because a lot of them have been raised up with this concept that secularism is a dirty word, freedom of speech is a dirty word.
Yeah.
But I'm like, well, what do you talk about? You know, when you look at a country like China, which is hegemonically powerful, actually, isn't that where you want secularism? And it's exactly like you say, it really makes people think when you can coach it in language that they understand, within the value systems they understand. So I think it's a very interesting point, and I'll want to kind of tease that out a little bit later. Zoe, if you want to.
So I'm here really to talk about my own sort of personal experience and how I have weirdly kind of embraced religion recently, but from a completely atheist perspective, and really embracing the cultural aspects of religion. So a bit of background about me. I'm brought up atheist by atheist parents who have a heritage of Jewish in our background. My grandparents were Jewish. All my family has been brought up religious, apart from my parents and me. And I was free to choose my own faith. I remember my mum saying to me when I was about 8, you know, after I'll come back to that in a minute when I was about 8, but explaining to me, you're free to choose faith if you want. And I was like, well, God doesn't exist, so no thanks. But when I was at school, I learned quite early on that being Jewish was something that, although I didn't know what it was, other people seemed to. So, although I was atheist, so a friend of mine, when I was about 6 or 7, said to me, oh, I can't play with you anymore because you're Jewish. And I went home and I said to my mum, because I thought it was like someone saying, I can't play with you because you've got the lurgy. And I went home to my mum and I was like, what's Jewish? I don't understand why Kathy won't play with me. And my mum was absolutely livid and sort of then explained to me, well, this is your religion, but we just don't bring you up in this way because we don't believe in God. And that's when I first understood that religion can be more than just a belief. It can be cultural, and it can be about your background. And as David Baddiel, the comedian David Baddiel, so succinctly puts it, racists don't care they don't care about your religion, they care about your bloodlines. And if, you know, Hitler or whatever was here now, I'd be up against the wall being shot. So it doesn't matter that I'm atheist. My heritage still precedes who I am. And in fact, Imtiaz mentioned that I wrote this book anonymously, and when the Sunday Times outed me in 2006, shortly after, about 5 months later, a fascist right-wing supremacist website put a photo of me up saying that I was a Jew begging to be shot. At that point, in 2006, I had never in my entire sort of adult online life stated my background at all. So they were making a judgment based on my name, Zoe Margolis, which kind of sounds Jewish, but also possibly Greek, and I've always managed to kind of get by on that balance of what is she, but she's definitely not English. And you know, what I looked like and what my name was. And so I realized that people always viewed me through the lens of what they perceived me to be as. And of course I have white privilege, so I don't get the, you know, the racism that non-white people get in the UK. But I always get othered. And it was an interesting experience for me being completely atheist and yet experiencing anti-Semitism for, you know, from the age of, you know, being 6 and having my friends say that she can't play with me. But also, you know, having people spit at me on the street and say horrible things and making jokes about Jews being tight or ruling the world or being part of the New World Order or all of this other bullshit, excuse me. And it sort of, I've kept a lid on it because I'm atheist. And so my whole sort of adult life, I've gone, well, you know, people have got this racism, this anti-Semitism, but, you know, I'm atheist, so I know it's not, you know, about my religion because I'm not religious. And in recent years, I've started to become more and more vocal online, actually, about sort of defending being Jewish and being culturally Jewish. You know, as far as I'm concerned, the only connection I've really got to Judaism is, you know, the food, which is great, and little bits of Yiddish, you know, which my parents, you know, they swear because they remember bits from their parents. So there's lots of filthy words, and I like learning them because it means I can be really rude in front of other people and they don't know what I'm saying, generally. But that's my connection to my history and to my ancestry, and it's really important to me, so sort of keep hold of those things. And in recent years, I'm a Labour, always voted Labour my whole life, and in recent years I've felt very, very uncomfortable with what's been happening in the Labour Party, and I don't really want to turn this talk into what happened with Labour and anti-Semitism and the acknowledgement of that or the ignoring of that, except to say that I have felt extremely isolated as a Jew, even though I'm atheist, and as a non-practicing Jew. And I now consider myself Jewish, even though I'm atheist, because of, as I said before, how people view me through their lens of criteria in terms of whether I fit in or not. And I felt so upset by recent events that when it came to the Parliament demonstration, which I went to, it was a profoundly moving experience for me, being amongst people back in April this year, who were Jewish, but not everyone was, you know, religious, but people were just there supporting people who were Jewish who felt isolated by what was happening with the Labour Party. And there was just this moment where there was this elderly couple, and they must have been, honestly, like 90. They were barely able to stand, both on walking canes, and people were helping them along. And I heard them say to a newscaster, "Oh, we've never been on a demo before." And I just thought, my God, you know, like for them to come out, to feel like they feel this isolated, there's something happening here, and it's really important to them to feel that they're part of this, that they're part of saying we're not going to take any anti-Semitism anymore. And as a result of that, for the first time in my life, I wanted to do something religious. And Passover was also about a week after the demonstration in Parliament Square. And I've done 2 Seder dinners in my whole life, both with family. And I thought both of them, you know, it goes on for like 5 hours, and people are just talking and drinking and eating, and there's prayers. And I've never really felt the need or the want or the desire to participate in anything religious, so I've only done 2. But this particular time, I felt so isolated and felt like I needed to be with people who wouldn't question how I felt about politics and how I felt about my position as a Labour member and how I felt about being atheist, but also Jewish, and that kind of internal conflict that I've got. And I put a note out on Twitter and asked if anyone had a space at their Seder table. And a random stranger, who it turns out has done this before, a journalist called James Masters, invited me to spend the evening with him and his family. And he did it previously, a year before, for someone else who also asked. And so I went along to this person's house who I've never met before, and I had Seder with him and his family. It's the first night of Passover, and it's a very religious event, and I didn't know, I've never learned Hebrew, so I didn't understand any of the Hebrew. I didn't understand any of the religious, prayers, but I felt that I was safe and I could express my connection to my history, to my family, to my ancestry, and feel proud of doing that and not feel like this was something to be ashamed of, and also not fear any hatred at the dinner table. And when I came away from that dinner, they welcomed me and they treated me as family and made me understand the importance of community. And I think I've been missing that as an atheist, that I haven't, I love coming to this convention and it's full of wonderful people and we have amazing discussions, but it's not the same as having a community of people who you are absolutely bonded with. And this dinner that I had with this group of people I've never met before, they treated me as one of them, and I felt like I was family with them and felt like I could trust them. And so I came away from that feeling that I want to have more of that in my life, but I don't want the religion. I don't want to have to praise a God that I don't believe in order to have this community. So I started looking up online. And of course, in the UK, there's the amount of people who identify as Jewish is 300,000 people, which is tiny. But in the US, it's many, many millions. And in New York, where I've been to many, many times, it's quite a few million. And I discovered in New York they have a Jewish Humanist society. They have a congregation in New York, an actual religious but non-religious congregation that's Humanist Judaism. And they do all of the holidays, they do all of the religious events, but they totally eliminate God from it. They even have prayer books, and they've removed all reference to God, which I think is amazing. And they talk about rationalism, and they talk about science, and they talk about reason, and they talk about using the shared experience of culture and identity and history and oppression as well to understand and argue through reason and science that we can be better human beings, that there can be a sense of community between people, the shared identity of being Jewish, and they also welcome non-Jews as well, and support each other in making this life a good one. And I absolutely, the website, citycongregation.org, if anyone wants to have a look, is absolutely brilliant. It explains everything that they do, and it just sounds like a wonderful community of people that get together on all of these important events, but that aren't sort of praising religion. And I looked and I was like, oh God, there must be something in the UK. And there's not. And I suppose, I wonder if today is like a call to arms, if there's any people in the room today who might be interested in sort of setting something up with me. I would love to have something that would allow me to feel that I don't need to deny my Jewish heritage, that I can actually be proud of my identity, but also aren't going to expect me to have to reel off, an hour's worth of prayers of things that I just don't believe in. I want to support rationalism and reason and understanding that human beings can be better, that we can all fight for the same things, and also know that I can have my Jewish identity be part of that and not a religious one. So that I hope this brings up some discussions. I'd love to chat to people afterwards if anyone's interested in getting together with this.
Thank you. Awesome.
I might have a member for you immediately. We did a face-to-face session yesterday for professionals, and a lady in the audience, I don't know if she's here actually, she was talking about how she's from a Jewish background, and how, because we deal with a lot of ex-Hasidic Jews, and she was talking, or Haredi Jews, and she was talking about kind of that sense of identity, so she might be interested. One of my experiences actually that was quite fascinating is I went to a dinner with Geshe. Geshe is like a charity in the UK that helps people who are leaving the Hasidic community, which can be quite difficult and traumatizing. And so we're sitting down. It's very food-based. It's very, for one of the Jewish religious holidays, it's very food-based. One of the guys, Ben, who's one of our speakers, started reading from one of the religious texts, in this kind of song-like. And the young girl was like, no, this reminds me of school. But actually, they were kind of engaging with their heritage in a way that's safe. And it's a safe environment. And I've seen this a lot with apostates. So like with ex-Muslims, we celebrate Eid, but we'll do it where we have lots of alcohol usually. We'll do like, Ramadan. Ramadan is a difficult time, but for me personally, I'm intermittent fasting last month, in a very healthy way, I think. But for me, it's like, yeah, I can't and what kind of thing. So it's very interesting. Can I throw a question out to you guys, actually, which is, you've both talked a little bit about, I guess, engagement with religious communities and religious ideas, as well as, especially in your talk, Sunny, tolerance. And you were talking a little bit about the false war that new atheists are creating. I'm going to play a little bit devil's advocate there and bring out the question about, when does tolerance become a problem? Because sometimes people's views and ideas can be intolerant, and tolerating intolerance is not tolerant.
Give me an example, though. That would be useful.
You were talking about the turbans or the hijabs, for example. I mean, we deal with young girls as young as 7 years old wearing the hijab. Now, it's a difficult thing because it is a question around freedom of choice, as well as freedom of choice of the family. And I deal with ex-Muslims as well, who a lot of them hate the hijab, especially if they're women, but some of them don't like the language of, you are not allowed to put the hijab on your child either, because they think actually that might disadvantage the child. So that's an example, for example, where you're tolerating intolerance.
I mean, it's an interesting one. When I was about 9 or 10 years old, I said to my mom that I want to put a turban on. And they'd never brought me up wearing a turban, so suddenly I was allowed to wear a turban. They were like, okay, go on then. Even though my brother at that time was always brought up wearing a turban. So within Sikhs, the same debate doesn't come up, but you have to understand that it also applies to Sikhs. So I find it fascinating that we talk about the hijab on women, Muslim women, but not about turbans on young Sikh boys, right? Because obviously they're also forced to wear it when they are brought up. So, so to a certain extent, we're automatically assuming that boys have more agency than the girls, right? Now, Sikhs, Orthodox Sikhs also bring up the girls with turbans on, and my brother like I said, passed away. So there is that point. Now, when I was 13, I said to my mom, you know what, this turban thing is not working out for me. I want to cut my hair. I'm not religious as it is, and it's a bit of a drag, to be honest, and as you can see, the decision turned out to be the right one. Although there are Sikhs out there who cover their baldness with wearing a turban, so I could have gone down that route as well. So the mistake we're making is, once we politicize the turban or the hijab, then it becomes a form of identity for them, which they have to then defend. So the best way you can get more Sikhs to wear a turban is by saying you're not allowed to wear a turban. Because what happens here, of course, is that they will say quite rightly that our gurus told us to wear a turban as a form of our identity, and it's true. So the minute you say to a Sikh, I'm sorry, but you're not allowed to put a turban on a young child, there is nothing more offensive for a Sikh. And they will immediately get very defensive. So it's not always this idea. We have to get past this idea that they're always forcing someone to do it. Now, if we take the politicization out of it and we create a society in which people, young girls, feel like they are able to raise their voice, they don't, in more South Asian societies, in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, there is no doubt that women have less agency. The society, the patriarchal culture that they live in makes it harder for them to speak out. We simply have to create a culture here, and it's happening already, where young girls of minority backgrounds are able to speak out, and they do.
Can I extend that a little bit further for both of you? Do you think that the way people are engaging with religion today is quite gendered, and do you think it's becoming more gendered? Any idea?
I don't know. I mean, there's a couple of members of my family who are women who have sort of embraced a kind of a new version of Judaism, where they are like the head of all the prayers and they say everything, and they are like the super religious one, and their partner isn't at all religious, but they are really, really strict and very orthodox with it. But they kind of do it in a hippie-ish way. And I know a few people like that, so I wonder if that's a kind of trying to make it more matriarchal, trying to take control of it a little bit, trying to have some agency in it. I mean, I still find it a bit jarring that the prayers they're reading are all about praising a man, essentially, and are very sexist and very gendered, but it kind of still works for them and they feel empowered by it. So I kind of have to say, well, each to their own.
Sure.
How do you think the debate is evolving? So you guys have been bloggers and writers and in many ways, at the kind of cutting edge of conversation about a lot of topics, but also faith in Britain. How do you think the conversation has been evolving if you look at it? Do you think it's getting better? Do you think it's getting worse? Do you think it's becoming harder to talk about your ideas without being worried about kind of, safe space in terms of language and offending people? Or do you think it's actually becoming easier and we are having a much bigger playground of ideas?
Go on, please.
I was going to say, I think that there's so much online discourse which is vitriolic. It makes it hard to hear anything that isn't shouting. And I think there's a lot of dialogue that isn't shouting. It's people quietly having interesting and respectful debates where they're trying to understand and learn and accommodate. But it's really hard to hear that amongst all of the noise. And the noise is vicious and violent and hateful. And unfortunately, when that's happening, you have to challenge that. You have to shout it down, the Islamophobia or the anti-Semitism, the racism. It's present and it's dominant in our dialogue, so we have to actually challenge that. But that hides the real sort of understanding and support that exists.
Yeah. I mean, just to add to that, I used to be an optimist, where I used to think that things were heading in the right direction. And I used to say, I mean, our parents had it a lot worse than we did, so we are moving in the right direction, and which is fine. Things take time to change, attitudes take time to change. But it's just, we watch the news, and I think what really worries me, that it's frighteningly easy to polarize people. And we have seen that happen right in front of our eyes very quickly, and I've seen that, and I can see that within even minority communities. I mean, within minority communities, it's been easy to polarize people for quite a long time, right? But if you see it happening in the mainstream quite quickly, you start to get worried, because you then see the backlash to that from your own communities and people getting really angry. I met a gay Muslim in 2002 or 3, and he was telling me that until 9/11 happened, I never felt like a Muslim, and now I'm very conscious about my identity, as a Muslim. So there is never, 9/11 created far more Muslims than anything else. And the same way, if you attack Sikhs, suddenly a lot of Sikhs feel really passionate about their identity. And as Zoe quite rightly pointed out, the minute you attack the Judaism, and people get essentialized, as in so it's very difficult. It's very easy for people to say, oh, you guys are just doing identity politics. And that's the narrative in the media now, which is, oh, you guys are talking about identity politics, and therefore we're going down this route where everyone is put into those boxes. But minorities don't feel like they're controlling the conversation. We don't feel like we are able to control what is going on out there. What we can simply do, to a large extent, what we're doing is reacting to the national conversation. So if that conversation is becoming polarized, naturally we're going to become polarized. That's the problem. So if I'm sitting here thinking, guys, we need to calm the fuck down and just stop attacking each other, it's very difficult to do that, because as you pointed out, our social media, the main way we have conversation, rewards people who are good at shouting and polarizing people. So it's a difficult time to say, everyone just calm down a little bit, stop shouting at other people, let's just try and understand what other people are saying and find a language in which we can communicate better, because that's what we want.
There's a very interesting kind of movement of street epistemology. I don't know if you've come across it on YouTube. It's a very interesting way of talking to people generally about atheism or whatever. And if you look at some of the videos, they're very different in how they interact. And I've seen a lot of these, what I guess you kind of would refer to kind of new atheist types, use that, and it's quite useful, because it's a lot more, you listen better. Last question before I open it up to the audience. In terms of humanism and humanists, both of you have kind of talked in many ways about communication and communicating to, I guess, minority groups, and using, in some ways, the lens of humanism as a way to help bring people into the fold of these groups. For both of you, how would you do that? How would you recommend we start looking at doing that? In your case, I mean, specifically within, Jewish humanism or whatever that might look like, and in your case, kind of talking to people from your community and wider. How would you kind of approach that, and what advice would you have for us?
I don't know. I mean, I just think human beings are essentially logical, and that when you sort of point out to them that they can think in terms of reason, people go, Yeah, that makes sense. And it's like a logical, simple solutions that people look to faith as an answer. And when you provide them with what's really quite simple, which is just a reasonable way of looking at the world, which can encompass the ideas of faith and encompass the ideas of culture and ancestry and background, people, I think, are more open to then understanding what humanism is. It's not a sort of... humanism, I think, is not to say that, you know, faiths are bad. You know, I mean, I'm as atheist as they come, but I would want to be secular and understand that people still have faith, but I want to bring them round to my reasonable way of thinking by getting them to understand that reason.
And how do we get the body of humanists to understand better where other people come from then?
I think that's a hard question to answer. Maybe trying to get people to understand why people have faith. And I believe sometimes it's because there's a lack of an alternative for them to think about.
Sure.
To question for whatever reason, whether it's cultural or family or society, and being provided with an alternative to question and think about, that allows them to make up their minds.
Sure. I mean, that question about understanding why people have faith is absolutely essential. You know, I could not believe the community that he had created, my brother, through YouTube. These people were willing to do a lot for him and for the family after he died as well, because they felt like that he had created a family. And, you know, in our world where people feel sometimes disorientated or feel disengaged from the world or pissed off, we want to go into a bunch of people that we feel that we can belong to. And if you can create that, you create a very, you know, something with potential in a good way and a bad way. So we have to understand why these people want community, and that's not a bad thing. I just want to speak to them and say, look, you can have your community, that's fine. I understand where you're coming from, but we just want to create. I absolutely believe in free speech and you know, secularism. I want to just convince them that it's in their interests as well. So I just feel like a lot of the conversations that we're having is people just saying to each other, our way of doing is right and your way of doing is wrong. But if we can appeal, my brother always used to say to people, he knew that the community was not in a good place, the Sikh community. So what he would do is just sort of say to people, let's think about a future in which we are in a better place. What does it take to get there? And you know, appeal to people's better way of sense, you know, and their higher sense of living. I can say to people, I'm English, and I want to create an England where I feel included and other minorities also feel English. And I think a lot of people would sign up to that. So rather than having a fight and saying, that's not English, I don't want to be English, you know, because that's the EDL. And that's not a useful debate to have. And we can do the same thing with religious people.
Can you guys thank our speakers?